Shalom, Minister, Your Excellency, ambassadors, but most important of all, the precious Ruth Katz, Holocaust survivor, great resident of Ottawa, here today with her wonderful daughter, Flora Love, a friend of mine of over a quarter century. Thank you for your courage and your persistence in carrying on this story. The 80th anniversary of the liberation of the prisoners in Auschwitz-Birkenau has a special and important meaning to me. About 15 years ago, I was tasked with representing the government of Canada at the March of the Living, which is an inspiring gathering of survivors and Jewish youth who walk from Auschwitz, the first concentration camp, to nearby Birkenau, which was by far the most prolific. We walked arms locked. I was privileged to be with a survivor who was over 80 years old. And when we arrived at the gates of Birkenau, he stopped suddenly and he said, "That's where he stood." And he pointed into the air. He said, "When I was a little boy, I walked in here, and there was Dr. Mengele." And Dr. Mengele, with the wave of a hand, would decide what would happen to each prisoner after a glance. Would they go immediately to the gas chamber, or would they be enslaved to days or weeks more intensive labor? And for reasons he did not know, he was given a pass. That was the vivid nature of it. Mengele was probably the personification of evil on earth. He exemplified all that was evil about the Nazi regime: the cruelty, the murder, the twisted and perverted ideologies. An ideology that, though it did tremendous damage and killed over 6 million Jews, was ultimately defeated. The Jewish people triumphed. As I noticed symbolically when I looked around to see the beautiful stars of David flying on Israeli flags all through that march. In the background was the echo of a cantor singing the psalmody, Psalm 23. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil." We were literally in the valley of the shadow of death, with the barracks on each side and the lower ground in the middle. And we looked around as Jewish children placed stones on top of stones that they used as makeshift memorials, as if to say, "We haven't forgotten you. We still remember you. We still love you." That is the triumph of the Jewish people, who then later gathered their numbers and gave rebirth to the great state of Israel. And now, in that state, the Jewish people are the only people I know of who speak the same language, worship the same faith, on the same land as they did 3,000 years ago. And that doesn't mean it's without difficulty. We had all hoped that we had left the ugly, authoritarian, socialist ideologies of fascism and communism behind. But they came roaring back with extreme and radical movements. New threats emanating from Iran metastasized and exploded back into the forefront on October 7th. An unprovoked attack that was deliberately designed to carry out the maximum amount of cruelty against the most innocent people. A seven-front war initiated by Tehran seeks to carry out a Holocaust-like attack on the Jewish people. October 7th was the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. But in the period that had followed, Israel has fought back. The regimes and the terrorist groups that sought to annihilate Israel have themselves been annihilated. And Israel has friends, as do the Jewish people. Friends that will stand through thick and thin, through fire and water, not equivocating, not speaking out of both sides of our mouth. We must stand with the Jewish people and the state of Israel in their effort to preserve their existence and to live a peaceful, democratic life. And that should not be taken for granted. We see on our own streets anti-Semitism, guided by obscene, woke ideologies that have led to an explosion in hate crimes. Hate crimes were up over 100% in Canada before October 7th. Now they're up 251%, with Jews being the principal victims of those crimes. We must not just condemn these things, we must take action against them. We must deport from our country any temporary resident that is here on a permit or a visa that is carrying out violence or hate crimes on our soil. It was obscene that the IRGC remained legal in Canada for 4 years after it killed 55 of our citizens in the attack on PS Flight 752. It is outrageous that 700 IRGC officials are on Canadian soil, many of them living the lap of luxury on the fruits that they stole from their own people. And we must condemn when our own government gives grants for anti-racism to people like Leif Maruth, or appoints Birju Datani to head up the Canadian Human Rights Commission. We must stand up against these outrages and stand for bringing our people together, united in our common values, our common freedom, and our common love for our country and for humanity. Because in the end, we know the Jewish people will prevail. We know the state of Israel will live on. We as Canadians must live on as allies and friends, so that when we say never again, we mean it.